Hey guys, well, happy Christmas, and I thought it might be kind of fun to celebrate Christmas to do a review of a Christmas film. So this is Home Alone, released in 1990, starring Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, and written by the late, great John Hughes. Now, the interesting thing about this film is, really honestly, when you think about the premise to this, it didn't really need to be a Christmas film at all. It involves a family going away on vacation. It would make a lot more sense to set this film in the summer, because who goes away, or certainly who goes abroad at Christmas time? So they tend to spend time at home at Christmas. So in that sense, it doesn't make much sense for this to be set at Christmas. However, the basic sort of message or moral or resolution to this story is the idea of appreciating your family, and understanding that even though you may not always get along with them, you still love them and you still want to spend time with them, and you would still be very regretful if they weren't around. And that is definitely something that ties in with Christmas really well. So I really like the idea that this is set at Christmas, and so that's a really nice idea. And there is certainly a very sort of nice sort of Christmassy look to this film the whole time. That last sort of act or scene in the film where Kevin's wearing red pajamas and a green dressing gown. Red and green. It's the Christmas colours, isn't it? It's a really nice image. But anyway, I'm going out of order here. The main three actors in this, of course, have been defined really by this film: Macaulay Culkin, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern. When you think of those actors now, really, the first role you think of is their respective roles in this film. And it is just sort of generally considered one of the best Christmas films of all time. Perhaps it's, in a sense, also perhaps the first film you think of when you think of John Hughes. And he's written some absolute fantastic teen film. This isn't actually a teen film, actually. Generally, he writes teen films. This is sort of focused on much younger kids, actually, this type of film. In all honesty, I don't dislike this film at all, but I do think it's a tad overrated, actually. I'm not absolutely sort of loving this film and thinking it's one of the greatest of all time. It's probably not even one of the best Christmas films of all time. I thought it might be interesting to do a review of this slightly different perspective on the film. I like the setup, the basic premise of this, of learning to spend more time with your family, or learning to value your family even though you may not always get along with them. There's a lot of other stuff in this film that I don't think quite ties into that theme quite as well, and it's a lot like, I suppose, like Gremlins or Die Hard. It's set at Christmas, but at the same time there's a lot of stuff in there that could quite easily have been taking place at any time of year. It doesn't quite sort of flow with that sort of Christmas theme the whole way through in the way perhaps I would have liked it to. Now, first off, the very first scene in this film, you've got Harry dressed up as a cop right at the very beginning, and I have a real issue with this whole thing because, first of all, we don't know who Harry is at this stage. He's dressed up as a cop, so you, of course, assume that he actually is a cop. You don't know what he's doing there. You don't know why he's there and why he's trying to find these things out. That really left me a little bit confused the first time I saw this film. I didn't understand who he was, why he was there, or why even it was of any kind of real relevance to the story that he was there and finding stuff out, really. Also, who's let him in? The very first shot of the, well, not quite the first shot, but one of the first shots of the film, we see him standing in the hallway trying to get the attention of people. How's he got into the house? Somebody must have let him in, and yet nobody seems to know that he's there, or nobody seems sort of really bothered about the fact that he's there. Nobody sort of questions. If I saw a cop just standing there in the middle of my hallway, I would just assume maybe that somebody in the house was in a bit of trouble. They'd broken the law or something, so I would certainly want to speak to him about whatever it was that was the reason that he was here. So somebody must have let him in, and yet they've just simply abandoned him almost instantly. And then later on in that first scene, he answers the door. Like, why would you answer the door to a house where you don't live? I just find that kind of bizarre. I don't know, I'm not someone who will go round other people's houses, but I just think if I was in that situation, I wouldn't answer someone else's door. If I were a guest in the house or something, I wouldn't want to answer the door to someone else's house. I just find that's kind of odd. So, obviously, then we're introduced to the main character, Kevin. And there's actually quite a good introduction, or the very first thing he says and does in the film, I think is quite good, and that's he's frustrated because he's not being allowed to watch a film because he's too young, and that is a good sort of thing to relate to. I think as kids we were all kind of rather frustrated by the fact that we weren't allowed to do things just because we were too young to do them, or our parents didn't think it was safe or something. It was a very sort of frustrating time of your life, you know, not being able to do everything that you wanted to do just because you're too young. I mean, your age is not something you control, it's not your fault. At the same time, obviously, you understand later on in life, I think, that certainly your parents not allowing you to do things is certainly justified. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of dilemma. But I think for the rest of that first act, you know, on the first sort of day of the film, that first night, for the rest of it, Kevin acts like kind of a dick, if I'm honest. You know, he's been messing around in the garage with the glue gun, even though he's been told not to, and his dad's told him that it's dangerous, and yet he's still doing it anyway. And did he have any particularly good reason for doing that? No, he was making ornaments out of fish hooks. That's kind of strange. His justification for using his dad's new fish hooks to make ornaments for no particular reason is that he can't make ornaments out of the old ones. They've got dry worm guts stuck on them. Oh, God, yes, honestly, Kevin, what kind of a world is it that you live in where you're expected to make ornaments out of old fish hooks? Yeah. No, here's an idea, Kevin. How about you just not make ornaments out of fish hooks in the first fucking place? I don't understand that, you know. Really, honestly, I'm siding with the father on this. You know, Kevin's acting like a complete dick here. He's messing around with a glue gun in a garage when he's been told not to. I'm sorry, but I do not sympathise with Kevin at all there. I sympathise with him not being allowed to watch a film, but I don't sympathise with him on that whole thing. And then, obviously, the big sort of climax to this whole act, you know, the thing that pushes Kevin over the edge and makes the whole family hate him. He charges into Buzz and causes a complete mess in the dining room while they're trying to eat food. Now, Kevin's reasons for being annoyed here are understandable. Buzz has eaten his pizza, which obviously is a horrible thing to do when he knew it was Kevin's. You know, he's obviously just being a bully to him. Why does Kevin react the way he does? I don't understand that. You know, again, the family's reaction to the way Kevin's acting here is completely understandable, and I do not sympathise with Kevin at all here, because the way he's reacted makes absolutely no sense. Why has he done that? He's absolutely gotten what he deserved. I'm sorry, but, you know, this first act, Kevin is just acting like a complete dick. I don't relate to him at all. I don't sympathise with him at all. The only part, I think, where I sympathise with him slightly, I think, is that first thing we see him say, you know, he's not being allowed to watch a film. So, obviously, you know, the most interesting part of this film, I think, for me, is that first day when Kevin's been left home alone. Now, obviously, there's a big hurdle for the film to get over here, which is, obviously, the idea that the family would be rushing to the airport. You know, all those people there would, and none of them notice that Kevin isn't there, even when they're getting on board the plane. Like, does Kevin not have a ticket? You know, that, you know, is just never used or something. I don't know, maybe he was on his mum's ticket or something. None of them notice Kevin isn't there, and I suppose it's a kind of double-edged sword, you know. The fact that there's a whole massive group of people, it makes sense that one person, you know, would be missed. You know, there's so many people to account for. You know, it makes sense that you would miss one. But this is the family we're talking about, you know, the people who see and talk to Kevin every single day. Wouldn't one of them at some point notice that he wasn't there? They were in a rush, to be fair, and it is quite a difficult hurdle for this film to get over in order to move the film in the direction that it needs to go in order to give us the plot that we need. Yeah, I'd say, you know, it doesn't quite make sense, but I think I'm okay with it. Obviously, that first day when Kevin is home alone, he does sort of do the typical kind of things that you would imagine a kid would do were he actually left home alone. He just does all the things that he wouldn't be allowed to do if there were people there. You know, he watches R-rated films, he eats crap, he goes through other people's private things. I find that gangster film that he watches kind of interesting, because obviously this is a family film, and obviously that film he's watching isn't real, so they create a gangster film that is appropriate to show in a family film. No gangster film like that in real life would exist, so, you know, it just seems kind of funny to me watching this now. You know, you've got these two guys in this gangster film talking and not swearing at all, and then he guns him down with, you know, a machine gun, and there's absolutely no blood anywhere. And then finally we find out who this damn cop was that was trying to find stuff out. You know, obviously you assume when you first see the film that, you know, he's just a regular cop finding stuff out. You don't quite understand why it's important exactly, and then, oh, he's a crook that was posing as a... I don't know about you, but I would have liked to have known that a bit sooner, really. I would like, you know, after he's finished with talking to Kevin's mother in that first act, I would like to have seen him, like, go out to the cab, you know, maybe take off his police outfit, you know, and Marv's there in the cab, and not the cab, the van that they have, and he's like, oh, I found out that they're taking a trip to Paris or something. You know, I would have liked to have found that out a bit sooner, really. And then there's another thing that bugs me, and that's the portrayal of the police in this film. They're kind of hopeless, really. lowest common denominator when it comes to the police in films, and I actually show one of them eating a donut. They're like walking cliches almost. You know, if the police were a race, this film would be racist. No, that doesn't make sense. They make fun of the police in the film in the same way that if you were to make fun of blacks in the same way, the film would be racist. I think this film is actually very offensive, really, to the profession of the police. Really, I think if I were a policeman, I would be offended by this film. They send a cop over to the house. He doesn't get an answer, and he just assumes that there's nobody home just because nobody answers. And then apparently they never get back to Kevin's mum and dad. They just have that mention. Oh, they're sending a cop over to the house, and they apparently never get back to them about, whether or not Kevin is all right. And then apparently this is set in a world where everybody goes away for Christmas. I said earlier, generally speaking, people just don't go on vacation for Christmas, and yet apparently everyone in this film seems to be doing it, because there doesn't appear to be anyone in the neighbourhood where Kevin and his family live who is home for Christmas. The suburb that Kevin's in appears to be completely deserted, except for that one old man. Then there's the shoplifting scene, completely pointless. Is the best way to describe that. Honestly, I've seen this film several times, and I'm just trying to wrap my mind around what the purpose of that scene is, where he steals the toothbrush inadvertently. I don't understand. It's another sort of hopeless portrayal of the police, again, in that scene as well. I don't understand the purpose of it. What does it achieve? What does it do? It doesn't pay off anything that had happened previously in the film. It doesn't set up anything that is going to happen later in the film. You could cut it out of the film and it wouldn't change the plot at all. We have that one moment, I think, where Kevin sees that old man again and is afraid by him, but we'd already seen that he was afraid by the old man. It doesn't even make for a particularly good scene, I think. Kevin stealing a toothbrush and doesn't even have the gall to go back to the shop and apologise later. It doesn't put him in a good light, that. So I suppose maybe one purpose of it is that Kevin's feeling a little despondent on his way back from the shops, and therefore isn't paying attention to the fact that there's a van about to run over him. And I kind of like the way that Marv and Harry, even though they're crooks, they still have a basic level of human decency, to just sort of educate a kid on, watching out for traffic. That's kind of good. And, Harry, feels a little bit guilty that maybe they've been a little hard on him, and he's like, no, okay, Merry Christmas. And then, obviously, Kevin recognises him because of his gold tooth. Interesting plot device, that, because obviously he probably wouldn't recognise Harry's face, from just seeing him once, but, that kind of distinctive mark, a gold tooth, it makes sense that Kevin would recognise him from that. And then quite a creative way that Kevin tries to lead them to believe that there are a bunch of people still in the house that night by putting all those mannequins up and having them move around on various different things. That was quite creative, that. It's kind of clever. It's not like in Home Alone 3, where the kinds of things the kid does is absolutely completely absurd, that there's no way any kind of 8-year-old kid would be able to do that kind of thing. It's kind of a sort of, it's creative, but it's not ridiculous. So I did kind of like that scene. But I do have to question, why do Kevin's family have all these mannequins in their house? We never find out what his parents' profession is. Maybe they're clothes designers or something? But, I don't know, I just find that a little bit odd. Another thing that just doesn't quite make sense in this film is that he sees various different adults while he's home alone, go around town, or only one of them in the entire film questions the fact that he's a kid, just on his own, wandering around with apparently no one to supervise him. That woman in the supermarket that asks him, are you here by yourself? And he obviously quite sensibly tells her no, he isn't. None of the other adults in this film question the fact that Kevin's just out on his own with apparently no supervision. So it is also kind of interesting, the way that Kevin gradually sort of turns into a better kid through the experience of being home alone. You see on that first day, he's just messing around in the house doing all the things that he wouldn't otherwise be allowed to do, eating crap and watching. And then gradually, over the course of the 3 days that he's home alone, he turns into a nicer kid and starts, becoming more responsible. We see him doing some washing up and doing the laundry on the third day that he's there, and he sets the house up for Santa Claus to come the next day. And he's eating macaroni cheese at the table with a knife and fork, and he's saying grace beforehand. There's quite a sort of nice sort of progression of a character. I'm not sure if that kind of change would happen over the course of just 3 days, but in fact, I'm not even sure that is actually what would happen if a kid were left home alone. But it is nice to think that being left home alone like that causes Kevin to become more responsible and become more like an adult, since, he has to do the things that his parents would otherwise do, like go shopping and do the laundry. Of course, you have the old man, Marley, I think he's called. I don't know if that's a tie-in with A Christmas Carol, perhaps. Could be. Actually, speaking of other Christmas stories, it's interesting, a thing you notice when you watch this film multiple times, Kevin watches Miracle on 34th Street on that first morning after the family's left, and the family in France are watching a dubbed version of It's a Wonderful Life. So interesting little subtle references to other Christmas films, just constantly reminding you of the fact that it's Christmas. I kind of like that, kind of nice little subtle thing that you only notice, I think, if you watch this film a few times. So anyway, the Marley character, I always thought he was a little underdeveloped, to be honest. He only has that scene where Buzz makes up this little story about him, how he murders his family, and then obviously there's a nice scene in the church where he explains that none of these rumours about him are true, and I guess Kevin just takes his word for it. He tells him about his son. I still kind of question why he would choose to tell Kevin that story. He's only just met Kevin. Why is he telling him such a sort of personal sort of story? Does he actually think Kevin's going to have a solution to this dilemma? I like the Marley character, but I do sort of question exactly why, after Kevin's been so afraid of him, suddenly they would just be, like best friends almost, in just that one scene that they have together. And we never meet his son. We never find out what the problem between the two of them is. I say that, but actually, the more I think about it, the more I think, we didn't really need to know what the problem between the two of them was. But I would like to have seen what kind of a person his son was, to see if he was generally a good character, and to see if, his annoyance at his father was justified, really. I would like to have sort of understood that a bit better, whether or not his son is actually the kind of person that you would want him to, fix things up with and get along with, or whether or not he got what he deserved by falling out with his father. Like I said at the beginning, it's another one of those things that doesn't really tie in with anything else. Again, it's about sort of family and spending time with your family, but why do we need a subplot that focuses on that? What was the main plot about Kevin learning to value his family not really enough or something? You needed that extra element. I mean, how does it might have worked, to tie in with the main theme of the film about valuing other members of your family, even though you don't always get along with them, if maybe Kevin actually learned something from telling this old man about how he should make up with his son. I kind of feel that Kevin should be inspired by the old man making up with his son to maybe do the same thing maybe with his brother or his dad or something. Or perhaps if, Kevin still, when he went into the church, perhaps was still sort of hating his family and was glad that they weren't there anymore. And then after speaking to the old man, he suddenly realised, kind of makes me feel guilty about the way I feel about my father. I don't want my father thinking about me like that, and he maybe learns from the old man, but he doesn't really. He's sort of already learned to value his family by that point already, so it fits in with the theme of valuing members of your family, even though you may not always get along with them, but they don't really tie together, these two plots, Kevin having issues with his family and this old man having issues with his family. And then, of course, there's the parts of the film that everybody remembers is almost sort of legendary, and that's the trap sequence. It doesn't tie in with any of the other themes of the film. It doesn't tie in with Christmas. It doesn't tie in with valuing members of your family. It's just a sort of standalone sort of slapstick sequence. Obviously, it's a John Hughes film, so you just come to expect that kind of thing from him. I got to be honest, I was never keen on John Hughes' slapstick. Never liked the National Lampoon films, or I didn't like the slapstick in the National Lampoon films. There's a few jokes in the National Lampoon films which were quite good, but generally speaking, I wasn't keen on them. Planes, Trains and Automobiles, again, in terms of plot, it's okay, but again, didn't like the slapstick in that. It got really irritating after a while. The John Hughes films that I actually really like, Ferris Bueller's Day Off and The Breakfast Club, are ones that don't really have that much slapstick in them. And in this film as well, the one major thing about it that I don't really like that much is the trap sequence with all the slapstick, which is, of course, the part that everybody talks about, is the part that everyone remembers. I don't really understand why Harry would grab the doorknob to the front door. Did he think it was unlocked? Why does he not just use the crowbar to try and prise it open? Then we find out, with all these traps Kevin set up around the house, which he set up pretty quickly as well, he apparently doesn't have the sense to just lock the basement door and lock the back door. All these ways he's tried to come up with to try and stop these two crooks, and yet he doesn't think to lock the doors. I like the way that a couple of these traps are actually alluded to earlier in the film. You know, there's a mention of the micro machines and how people are slipping on them earlier in the film. The tarantula, and they explain how that managed to get out of its cage. Well, not its cage, its sort of tank thing. When Kevin breaks all the shelves in Buzz's room. But most of them are not established. They don't explain where he got the blowtorch from. They don't explain where he got the nail from. They don't explain where he got the tar from. They don't explain where he got all those feathers from. It's also interesting how Kevin, after the whole thing with Harry and Marv is over, they obviously get taken away by the police, and Kevin tidies up pretty quickly. You know, all those micro machines, all those feathers, you know, the tar on those steps, the ice on the steps outside, the iron, the blowtorch, and whatever. He tidies it all up pretty quickly and gets it set up for Christmas morning. The crooks didn't get there till 9 o'clock. The whole thing must have taken the best part of an hour, so you know it's about 10 o'clock by the time that they leave. And yet he has to get things set up for Christmas morning. You know, how long would that have taken? What time did he go? He must have gone to bed about midnight, I would have thought. But apparently in all that cleaning up, he didn't bother to tidy up Buzz's room, if the last line of the film is anything to go by. And he apparently also somehow missed Harry's gold tooth, because the dad finds that the next morning. All that tidying of everything up, how the hell did he miss that? It's an okay film, but there's a lot of sort of jumping around in different sort of plots and everything, and a few things that could have been better explained, I think. One thing I do have to say, in giving this film credit, it's not Home Alone 2. Home Alone, you know, is a film that I was glad I watched, and I will, you know, continue to watch again, certainly. You know, it's a film I enjoy watching, even though I don't really think it's anything particularly special. I will not watch Home Alone 2 willingly, unless, you know, I just want to refresh my memory of the things that happen in it. It's not a film I enjoy watching at all. Two major problems, I think, with it. First of all, there's quite a sort of warm, cosy feel to the first film, because it takes place mostly inside a house in a suburban area. And, you know, obviously the nice theme of Christmas. Now, Home Alone 2 also takes place at Christmas, but it takes place in sort of a cold, dreary, crowded streets of New York, or a hotel room. A lot of it takes place at night, outside, you know, in the winter time. There's just sort of a cold, dreary sort of theme to this film. When I think of this, when I think of Home Alone 2, I think of it being extremely dreary, almost. You know, Nostalgia Critic talks in his Grinch review about how it looks like somebody's rubbed Vaseline on the lens. That's kind of Home Alone 2 for me. There's just kind of a darker tone to it, almost. The traps are much more severe and much more deadly. I think there's even one moment where Marv turns into a skeleton. That's kind of creepy. It's a much darker film. It also seems a bit far-fetched to me that the exact same two crooks would just happen to be in New York at the exact same time as Kevin. I do like the way that the homeless woman, who basically plays the same role as the old man did in the first film, she gets a lot more development, and there's a much stronger tone to the relationship between her and Kevin than there was between Kevin and the old man. So I do like that. I like Tim Curry in this film. I think he was kind of a nice addition, a new sort of villainous type character. I liked him. But the big flaw for me with this film is being left home alone, having the house to yourself and being able to do anything you want. That's quite a nice sort of fantasy for a kid of that age. That's something I think a lot of kids like the idea of. Being alone in the middle of a city that you don't know, much less the crowded streets of New York at Christmas time, would be fucking terrifying for a kid of that age. Not knowing anyone, not having any home to go home to for a kid, to be in a city that you don't know, to be completely alone, that would be terrifying. There's nothing appealing about that kind of idea to me. But the original is still an okay film. I think it's still worth seeing. I don't think it's any kind of masterpiece. I don't think it's one of the greatest films of all time or anything. I don't understand the appeal of the trap sequence that everyone remembers. But it's okay, I guess. Okay, well, that's it, guys. Have a very Merry Christmas. I'm probably not going to have a particularly nice day tomorrow because I'm working. But I hope you guys have a nice day tomorrow, all the same. Okay, so I will see you guys after Christmas. Bye. Okay, Merry Christmas, guys. Hope you have a nice day. Yes, I'm going to do it. Right.